Good morning, the Windaba audience and my panelists. Welcome to the 10th Windaba session, which is a visual, the first of its kind, due to situations that are beyond our control. This is the Breakaway session number 9, where we'll Today, we will learn more as to why it's so important agriculture, land reform, and rural development to develop. On the other hand, it's undisputable that wind energy is one of the services. He holds a BSc degree in GIS and is registered as a professional GIS practitioner with the South African Geomatics Council. Under his leadership, 12 municipal special development frameworks, 1 provincial special development framework, and 19 special planning and land use management bylaws were developed for the Free State province. He's also the technical team lead for the first regional special development framework being drafted currently for the Karoo region. My second guest is Mark Thornton, who's well known in the sector. Mark Thornton is the founder of and the chief executive officer of RedCap, which is a private company developing renewable energy project in South Africa since 2009. RedCap has today successfully developed a large quantity of megawatt capacity of wind projects that are in operation. He was previously the CEO and director of CEF Sustainability, prior to which he worked as a project manager for the United Nations Development Program. Mark has been a director for the RedCap Oka Wind Farm, Gibson Bay Wind Farm. He was also previously the chairperson of South African Wind Energy Association. Welcome, Mark. My last guest is Chris Brockwell. Chris Brockwell is a sheep farmer in the Bedford district of the Eastern Cape, which is on the footprint of Amakhala Emoyeni Wind Farm. He has 24 years farming experience. After graduating with a BSc degree in agri-economics at Maritzburg University, he joined FNB graduate program, being appointed as the manager of agriculture businesses. He moved to an irrigation farm. He has been farming merino sheep. He has been involved in the Amakhala Emoyeni Wind Farm, early construction, contract negotiation through specialist studies for the EIA, construction, as well as the operational phase as the landowner. To the audience there, please feel free to post your comments and questions. Our chat moderator will direct all your questions to me that I will pose to our panelists. As a start, the first panelist who will give us a presentation will be Mark Thornton. Then it will be followed by Fanny Mini, then by Chris Brockwell. Mark.
I think it's been great from what I've heard about yesterday, and I think we all look forward to next year actually getting into real live sessions again. So, Taklani, I'll start by showing you that wind farms can happily coexist with agriculture. As you can see behind me, those are cows happily grazing at the Cocoa Wind Farm in the Eastern Cape. So let me start by sharing my screen and starting my presentation. Taklani, you can confirm you can see that.
Yes, you can see this.
Okay.
Presentation.
So when we over a decade ago, when we started looking at developing wind farms in South Africa, we looked internationally to see what the pitfalls might be, and we knew that we could expect issues around the visual impact of wind turbines on the landscape, issues around the interaction of wind turbines and birds, and various issues that we knew were coming. One of the issues that we did not foresee over a decade ago was the issue that we were going to face with agriculture. And many of us know the famous SALA Act 70 of 70, and this is what we didn't foresee. The Act 70 of 70 is effectively there to ensure that food production in South Africa is protected. So it makes perfect sense, and it's understandable why that act is there. But from the early days of developing wind farms, it became quite clear that the Act 70 of 70 was going to impact us, because any lease we entered into, which exceeded 9 years and 11 months, effectively needed the minister of the then Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries to agree. And what we then had to prove to them was that we were not impacting agricultural land. So the main concerns that DAF had at the time, and still has today, which we are trying to change, is the concern that if you develop a wind farm, the land will become unavailable, because you now have wind turbines everywhere and agriculture can't take place. Or agriculture itself is discontinued because the landowner is now making so much money from their wind turbines that they've decided that they want to stop farming. The third issue is that a concern that post-construction and during operation, even if the farmer wanted to carry on, the infrastructure that was in place was going to then interfere with the farming activities. And the fourth was that the construction would cause some erosion and loss of topsoil. And finally, it would also deplete the water available for agriculture. So that is what the department viewed as the potential negatives. We had always thought there were going to be some positives, and the positives that we thought would materialize is that landowners, post the construction of a wind farm, the landowners would have increased financial security, because they now had an annuity income that wasn't subject to the vagaries of an agricultural market. And secondly, we would be putting in infrastructure onto their farms, it would assist them in their agriculture. So how do we now settle whether the impact of wind farms was good or bad? Well, we could go off to Google, and if you've ever Googled wind farming and cars, or wind farming and agriculture, you'll find some amazing facts. In fact, they are not facts, they are just conspiracies. There's one lovely one that suggests wind turbines will cause chickens to lay eggs without shells. Those are not facts. So what we decided to do as RedCap is we employed a specialist to take a look at the area that we had been most active in, which is the Humansdorp area of the Eastern Cape. And we got Johan Lantz to do a report for us. And that's what I'm going to give you some insights into today. So that was that image I started off with, the cows happily grazing with the wind turbines in the background. The study overview was, and it's important to point out, the study was commissioned and paid for by RedCap Energy, but we had no influence over the study. It was an important body of work we wanted done, so that's why we paid for it, but it was an independent specialist. It looked at 3 operational wind farms, the Jeffreys Bay Wind Farm, Coger Wind Farm, and the Gibson Bay Wind Farm, and then analyzed data from 7 dairies, which it actually ended up being engaging with 9 farmers. And the aim of the study was just to measure the impacts, both negative and positive. The methodology that was employed was to collect data from the 7 dairy farming operations. And the reason that it was focused on dairy farms, although there are beef cattle farms in those wind farms, is that the dairy farms are more intensive and they are historically a more profitable agricultural endeavor in that area. And importantly, dairy farms have very reliable records, because you're effectively measuring the output of milk, which is easy to measure. The specialist then did look at some of the surrounding farms, and also then to ensure that it was a holistic study, looked at farms where there were no wind farms. So what was the outcome of that study? What I've done is I've taken two of the key findings that came out of the study to present today, which will then inform the conclusions. And if you look at the graph that you see in front of you there, effectively what you have is you have the total farm size on that first column, and that's the total farmland hectares. It's 11,000 hectares of land for those the three wind farms. The actual hectares that the wind farm actually uses in those farms is, and this is an astounding figure, it's 1.4% of the actual land area in those farms has been used by the wind farm. So that's the complete wind infrastructure. It's the hard stands, it's the roads, it's the substations, etc. Now, when you start drilling down into those figures, it gets even better. Well, better if you're trying to show that wind and agriculture coexist very happily. You'll see that 84% of, and I remind you, it's of that 1.4%. So the majority of that 1.4% of land that was impacted was on uncultivated land. So that was land that the farmer was not using to produce any food or any milk. And the percentage of land that was cultivated that was impacted was 16. Again, I remind you that 16% of the 1.4. The most arable land there is the irrigated land, and the 0 of the irrigated land was impacted with those 3 wind farms. The second important finding was to look at the milk production. So here you can see the 3 wind farms. There's the Gibson Bay wind farm, Jeffreys Bay, and the Cocha. The first wind farm to go into construction was the Jeffreys Bay. You can see construction start here. And what this graph shows you is that when you look at the milk production over that period, other than a strange dip in the beginning for the Jeffreys Bay wind farm, which actually was linked to the changing of how the farmer, one of the main farmers, was farming and access to water, you will see that consistently throughout. So from construction, operation, and then operation on, the trend is always up for milk production. There is no down, and the clear conclusion there was that milk production did in fact go up post the wind farms being operational as opposed to going down. So, taking us back to those first 5 questions posed of what was problematic for the department in the early days, and slowly we are dealing with showing them that it's not problematic, is that question of, did the land become unavailable for agriculture? The answer, the 1.4%, shows you that definitely not. And important to note that over half of that land that has been used is actually an upgrade on the farms, which is beneficial to the farmer in his agricultural endeavor. The second was, did any discontinuation of farming happen? From the graph I've just shown you on the milk production, clearly that is not the case, and actually milk production went up. Did the wind farms interfere with the actual farming infrastructure and activity? So there were, on all these dairies, there are 9 farmers represented. They all stated that there was 0 reduction in their production, and that the disturbance was negligible, if anything. Did these wind farms damage the actual agricultural resource? So did it cause erosion and topsoil loss? 7 out of the 9 farmers said it caused absolutely no impact. There were 2 farmers who had issues, and when you read the report, you can see that those issues were actually being remedied. These were post-construction issues which were being remedied and were considered a minor impact. And the final issue was, did they deplete any of the water resources in the area? And that should have been directed towards farming, and the resounding answer was no. But that deals with the potential negative impacts. Now, when we look at the positive impacts, the question of did the increased financial security have a benefit to agriculture? Well, of course it did. It gave the farmers a bigger income, which allowed them to expand, it allowed them to pay off debt, and put in new pivots. And importantly, it also gave the banks comfort that the revenue streams coming in were effectively a bulwark against future dips in agricultural prices, and the farmer could borrow more money to invest in their farm. And the question of the improved infrastructure specifically on the farms was overall seen as beneficial. And importantly, the infrastructure in and around the farms, which is the district roads, etc., that was improved by the wind farms. So getting the milk trucks to the dairy was made simpler and easier. So a net benefit. But you don't have to believe Redcap, and you don't have to believe the person who wrote the report. So what we did was we got Dr. Koos Coetzee to do a review of the report, and he concurred with the findings of the report that wind farms and agriculture happily coexist. And if anything, the introduction of wind farms is a net benefit to agriculture. So I leave you with a final image. That's an image of the Gibson Bay wind farm, where you can see happy wind turbines, happy fields, all happily coexisting together. And I'll stop sharing my screen. Thanks, Aklani.
Thank you very much for the sweet and short presentation that has many stories in it. I'm interested to use indicator that both during construction and operation, the milk production trend went up. Is this because of there were other activities that you were doing to help the grazing land to improve during construction or operation? Or is it because now the farmer was getting some money to improve his grazing land?
It's a good question, Taklani. The full picture is that the wind farms actually had very little impact on that. That was what the farmers had been planning in anticipation of getting the revenues from the wind farm. So they had planned investments in their herds and the infrastructure.
Frameworks and delays. Cultivated land, and from your presentation, it's clear that 0, 0, 0, 0. I mean, you didn't even put any table on cultivated land. Now, what do you think the sector needs to do to really engage the Department of Agriculture to demystify their perceived perception about wind farm development?
So we have to continue that engagement, because we haven't completely changed the mindset yet. I mean, it is a lot better. When we started out doing the Cocoa wind farm, we had our SALA application rejected, I think, 4 times. We had to move turbines from one field to another. Often made very little sense to us what the change was for, but we finally got it. In our new developments in that area, it has been easier. So I mean, I do think the mindset is shifting, but industry has to keep on engaging. And I mean, what we advocate at Redcap is that we now need to start compiling the data, to put it together, to bring it to the department. We've used data from the area we're in. It would be great to augment that with other areas. I mean, specifically when you start looking outside of dairy farming into if you look at sheep farming, I'm sure the picture is even better. So we need to get that data together, present it to the department, and I'm sure they will then continue to see the light.
I think the last question from my side, Mark. I mean, to the farmers now, they talk now most of them, they know the benefits. I'm sure when you start this sector, you have to go and lobby and propose and secure and negotiate with the landowners. Are you seeing a trend where now the farmers, they are approaching you instead of you approaching them due to the benefits?
So we've definitely had, I guess we've had both experiences, because there have been landowners who, this is not from an agricultural perspective, but who had bad experiences during construction. But the majority have not. And so we ourselves, specifically in the cocoa area, we had to eventually draw the line in the sand to turn farmers away, because we knew we were getting to a point where the cumulative impact would possibly start becoming a problem. But farmers are intelligent business people. They can see the logic to it. They can see that the wind farm infrastructure has not destroyed their core business of their neighbors, and they see the benefit the neighbors are getting from it. So definitely there's been a huge upsurge in interest from farmers to participate in wind farms.
Thank you very much, Mark, for the presentation and for the answers. I hope now both the farmers and the authorities, I think they will see a benefit in developing the wind farms on agricultural land, and the coexistent. From this, you can see that it benefits both us and the farmers in terms of getting revenue, where they're able to increase production, and I'm sure they can invest on expanding their cultivated land. Thank you very much, Mark. My second panelist is Funny. It was my first time seeing and reading about the Karoo regional development framework. Will mind to take us through the rationale, the objectives, and as to why your department they're in the process of developing a framework for the Karoo region.
Thank you for having me. Just to check, is the presentation on the screen?
Yes, it's on
the great. Okay, thank you so much. I'm not reading my WhatsApps. I've got a little timer here because I'm notorious for speaking too long. So if I look down, it's just to check where I am. I think just first is who am I exactly? I work for the National Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, and I don't know if the people dialing in just now, but we, the previous Rural Development Land Reform and National DOV became one. Some of the units went to other departments, but we now one big, hopefully happy family. And my specific function is to look after spatial planning and land use management. And the Karoo is sort of an extra additional project that I manage for the 4 provinces. So I don't know, I was excited about the rural space and what we can bring to hopefully contribute there. And yeah, for my sins, I got that project. Just a quick overview. I'm gonna just say, where did it come from? Why the Karoo? Why specifically do a regional SDF? Matters of regional interest. Then the uniqueness of the space, a next conference which might be of benefit, and then where we are in the current project, because it's an active project currently, and anybody is welcome to join in. The picture maybe that's taken in the Karoo earlier this year. It's nice and warm now. It's not that cold anymore. But the Karoo is definitely a very unique and interesting place. And to such an effect that we can actually define it as a place or a region within South Africa. Now, the initiative started about 4 or 5 years back when SALA brought together all of the municipalities, and they were trying to get the Karoo or the small towns within Carnarvon, Calvinia, Fouriersmith, Jagersfontein, any one of that much, and there's a bit of a crisis. And in the R conference about 2 years back, we proposed that we do a regional SDF, and I'll get to the legislation and that part just now. But I think what is very significant in this case is that the 37 municipalities, out of their own accord, together with SALGA, came together and they agreed to this. So they agreed to we being a homogeneous space, and we want to make a difference. And that in itself is something that's never happened on the scale in the history of South Africa. And then we, as part of this Pluma process, and in terms of a development application process, the municipality under the